we've got a special guest, a recruiter from a staffing agency called Four Corner Resources, focused on IT staffing and software engineers. So I'm going to invite him to answer a few questions, share a bit of tips for 10 to 15 minutes or so. And then we're going to jump in to the second half, where we're going to talk about our question of the day, which is, what do you think will be one of the most difficult parts of this role for you? Which is, I think, a pretty important question, similar to the tell me about a weakness question, but it's an important question, and we'll talk about that one in a minute. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Let's give a muted round of applause to our guest today, Christian Garceron. So Christian, welcome to the Zoom stage. Thank you for joining.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
So Christian, really quick, why don't you set a little bit of context? Tell us about yourself as a recruiter and about Four Corners and the staffing agency broadly, and then we'll jump into a few interview tips for our engineers here.
Sure. So my name is Christian Garceron. I've been a senior technical recruiter at Four Corner Resources going on 4 years now. Four Corner Resources is basically a professional IT staffing agency in downtown Orlando. We work on anything IT, from, a refreshing technician, which is very entry level, to data scientists, to software engineers, all the way up through and to the top to data scientists, higher level project managers, anything in between. We've been focused in this space for 25 years now. And we have a pretty good hold, really good clients in the area, especially in the Orlando area. The bigger company names, the Wyndhams, the Disneys, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, all big companies that we work with. So what we try to do for them is just try to find them the top level talent that we can, whether that's in the Orlando area or for some companies all around the United States. That's really what we focus on. So that's what I do. That's what I do here. I've been doing that for a while. So.
Yeah. Awesome. So folks, as Christian gets talking, this is also a great opportunity to connect with each other. I'm going to ask Christian to drop his own LinkedIn at the end of this, but drop into the chat if you can, the geography that you're coming from, the boot camp that you're coming from, because I know there's folks from about a half dozen different boot camps, and then your LinkedIn, because connecting with each other now will help the job search, and connecting with each other now will certainly help your careers 5-10 years down the line, when all of you are managers and hiring your own engineers. So drop in your geography, your boot camp, and your LinkedIn into the chat here. So Christian, my first question for you, walk me through the process that a candidate goes through the staffing agency, because this might be kind of new to a lot of people here. It's not like they just apply for a job and then talk to a hiring manager and that's it. Kind of bring us to the basics of how does a staffing agency work, and how do they work with a candidate?
Sure. So there's different ways. Obviously, with more entry-level roles, what we really try to dig down on is the fact that you need to show your skill set in a better way that's better than everybody else's, right? At this point in time, when you all graduate, you all will have very similar skill sets. The way to kind of make yourself stand out is the way that we kind of talk to you first, figure out what it is that you're looking to do, and kind of go from there. Software engineer is a very broad title. It's up to you to kind of figure out, what do you think you're best at as far as your skill set languages wise goes, but also what do you think is going to be best for you in the future? Do you want to go into data? Do you want to go into front end? Do you want to be a full stack developer? That's what we try to guide on when we're first speaking with you, is trying to get that out of the way. How staffing agencies work is we like to think that we are the foot in the door for you already. We are just helping place your foot there instead of my own. How we do that is we basically partner up with different companies around the nation. They ask us, their managers, to find them talent throughout the world, and we find it for them. How we kind of go about finding talent is we usually go about it a few ways, right? There's obviously marketing that we can do to lead you to us, which is the easiest way to do things and not the preferred way. The second way is obviously, of course, you're posting your resume online. I'm reaching out to you actively looking for a position. And then the third way is just the best way that I think it should work. Is kind of just building that relationship. You understand that you're graduating right outside of you understand that you're graduating from a boot camp. When your graduation is, so you want to set yourself up for success. What do I mean by that? Speaking to a recruiter, getting him an idea of what it is that you want to work on, so he can start actively looking on the positions that you would want to fit yourself into. I think that's the best way to go about it. Agencies can work both ways. They can work either on a contract basis, which you guys will see a lot of, especially in the software engineer space. But there is also companies that work on the direct hire role, which is just basically.
Can you define the difference there, contract versus direct hire?
Sure. So when you work through a contract, you're going to be an employee of Four Corner Resources, right? Let's say you're an employee of Hilton. You will be an employee of Hilton, but you will be paid through Four Corner Resources. Everything, your benefits will go through us. Whereas opposed to if you go permanently, you're not going through an agency at all. You're simply being placed there through us, by us. At that point, you're retaining all of their benefits and everything like that. Obviously, most people are going to prefer that direct hire role. But where you see a lot of people jumping into contracts is usually because while they are shorter term, usually the pay is a little higher than it would be if you were to go in that same role as a direct hire way. It's really just a matter of preference, and that's why we try to kind of lock down those conversations at the beginning. Are you going to feel comfortable with the contract? Are you going to feel comfortable going direct? And that's kind of how we try to help, especially not new employees, new graduates. We try to make sure that we kind of get a better idea of what it is that you want, and that's what you should be doing with your recruiter as well, giving them a perfect idea of what it is that you want. That way, he can create a perfect situation for you.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's very important the recruiter's there to help, but also you got to recognize they've got a job to do and they've got thousands of candidates to do it for. So the easier you make their job, meaning, hey, Christian, here's what I'm looking for, something that looks like this, here's my skill set, the easier it is for Christian to pattern match and say, oh my God, I got the perfect thing for you. Or when that thing comes up, oh yeah, Julia was just telling me about, she's got a similar skill set that this is looking for. Christian, you mentioned differentiation, right? A lot of people are going to have similar skill sets. And a lot of people here, I know there's a few folks who have been different kinds of engineers and they're just transitioning into software. They were self-taught for a few years and this was their first formal foray, or they're literally brand new to coding and they started, 3 months ago writing their first line of code and they're fairly new to it. For that newer group, what are ways that they can talk about their skill set? Because I think it's very scary to be a brand new engineer and realize you're going up against people with a 4-year CS degree or people who have been self-taught for a few years. What would be your advice to people who are fairly new to software engineering, how they can stand out through the application process and then through the interview process?
First of all, you have to know that when they're looking for someone that's kind of brand new and out of boot camp, they're not looking for a specific skill set. What they're looking for is confidence and knowing that you know what you're speaking of. The way that you can make yourself stand out when you are a junior developer is the fact that you obviously have a way that you can show your work right off the bat, right? You can create a GitHub where you have your projects already lined up there where people can actually view your code. What a lot of employees will do is actually see if you have that GitHub and have those projects readily available. So that's why I always tell people, in a boot camp, I know you're probably working on some projects on your own. Emphasize those projects, show that you know what you're coding about, and show the employer that you have the confidence to take on this role. As I mentioned, there's not a whole lot that you can look for when you have just a boot camp. So you have to make yourself stand out in different ways, because as you can see, there's probably 35 people in this group, and all of you could probably qualify for an entry-level role as a software engineer. How you stand out is how you show your code, how you show your confidence, and being able to exude that confidence during an interview.
Yeah, I think that's so important, right? We talked about that on day one. And for anyone who missed it, basically what we said is the following: the skills are there, right? Let's assume you're front engineer and you got your HTML, CSS, JavaScript down. You even know how to collaborate with engineers. Like you've got that part down. Where you're going to differentiate is, like Christian said, that storytelling of confidence and that just clarity, right? Here's what I want. Here's who I am. Here's what I bring to the table. Here's why I'm teachable. Here's why I'm a really quick learner, things like that. Well, Christian, from your perspective or your experience, what are those, let's say somebody's never been or they haven't been on any engineering interviews at all. What might those loops look like for junior level engineers? What does the interview process look like?
So you go into these interviews thinking very analytically. You go into these interviews thinking that it's going to be a very intense technical interview where they're going to ask you, what is the direct line that you have to write? What is the command prompt? How do you pull those type of things up? I'm not trying to think of technical questions off the top of my head, but you're probably assuming that they're going to ask you a ton of technical questions. The reality of it is that you show confidence when you go in there, and it's going to make a huge difference when you're there. My biggest suggestion to all of you is the fact that if you're working with a recruiter, the recruiter will help you guide you through those loopholes. They more than likely have already worked on this position previously. So ask those questions and don't be afraid to ask those questions. What is my interview going to look like? How do I prepare for this best? And if you're working with a good recruiter who wants to get you through your door, he should be able to walk you through those loops, and you should be extremely prepared once you get there on your first step. That's why I personally think working with a recruiter to begin is super easy, because they've already been doing this for so long. They can guide you in that right direction to kind of put yourself in the best situation. The biggest thing, though, is don't think of it too analytically. You have to go in there with just confidence, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah. Last question on my end, Christian. But when it comes to the behavioral side of interviews among software engineers, especially those with limited experience, how would you suggest that they use prior experience? You know, I know people here are coming from hospitality and they're coming from events and they're coming from different levels of engineering. What is a way that somebody can use totally disparate experience, totally different experience to talk about why they would be a good engineer?
Speak about your teachability, right? A good engineer is going to be someone who's able and willing to learn. You don't know everything right now. I don't think anybody does towards the very end either. But you have to show that you're a teachable component that can be part of the company. You have to be able to show that you can work as a team, because there is nowhere in this world that you're going to work as a software engineer by yourself, no matter which way, no matter if you're writing all the lines of code by yourself. There's always going to be a QA. There's always going to be a manager. There's always going to be somebody there. Show that you can work within those teams, and it does show a good portion of what they're looking for. I keep going back to it, but there's not a whole lot that differentiates people within their, within their resumes at the very beginning. You have to show that you are that person that can be taught to be, that can further their career with just a little bit of assistance and a little bit of teaching. I think that's a suggestion that I would give to everybody that's kind of coming into the industry. You have to make sure that you're aware. You have to be teachable. You don't know everything right just yet. I apologize about the cat. I think he's over there in the back just making a mess.
That's right. At any given point, my dogs might start barking. So we got things going on here, Christian.
I lock him in the room before these meetings, and he gets out. So apologies about that.
Cat. Yeah. So right, what Christian said is exactly. If you guys were here yesterday, what we were talking about, which is respect what you are not, what other people think about you. Right? Realize that you're a brand new to this. Don't try to paint over it. Don't try to pretend to be bigger than you are. Just admit, yeah, I'm new to this, but that means I'm super hungry. But that means I'm super teachable. But I've been spending every waking moment working on a bunch of different projects with a bunch of different people, right? Exactly what Christian said. Don't like pretend to be a bigger deal than you are. Say, yeah, this is what I've got to bring to the table. And that means that I am, teachable, or can learn quickly, or I've been working harder than anyone else will work on this, or whatever else. Christian, one specific question from Sean here, just around dealing with the recruiters. And this is I see this quite a bit, unfortunately, where Sean's question was dealing with the recruiters who are not responding to emails and calls. Should I find another service? I'm going to make that a bit broader. What is the best way for candidates to engage with recruiters? Do they call up, should they type in like software staffing agency and call the first 10 and say, hey, my name's Joe, like, are you hiring? Should they browse LinkedIn? Like, what is the best way for them to engage? And what do you do if you're not getting responses? Why is that?
First and foremost, if you're not getting responses from your recruiter, that's the only job that they have as a recruiter. They should absolutely be responding to you. There's absolutely no reason. I would tell you that if you have a recruiter that you're reaching out to and he's not being very responsive, give it a couple chances. But more than likely, it's not someone that you want to work with anyways. The way that I would go about it is I would ingrain myself within an agency, but more so an agency, more so a recruiter. So for example, if you were to call Four Corner Resources, you could get a plethora of 25 recruiters. But if you stick with one, if you call in and you say, hey, I want to work with Christian, Christian is going to be the one that's going to be your point of contact at that point. That's who you reach out to every single time. If you're reaching out to an agency and you're just asking for a recruiter, you're going to get the win. You're going to get whoever picks up the phone, basically. And that's not what you want. You want that to be a relationship between you two, because at the end of the day, they're going to be happy that you got a job. You're going to be happy that you got a job. And it makes the relationship as a whole, recruiter to candidate, a whole lot better. As far as actually getting in touch with recruiters, LinkedIn is great. I love when people reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm currently looking for a position. This is my skill set. This is what I would look forward to. And give brief timelines as well. This is when I'll be looking. This is what I'm looking for, those type of things. That way the recruiter already kind of has an idea in his head how he can place you. Our minds are constantly working. We're always trying to figure out where we can place people in different situations. So I think LinkedIn is probably the best way to go about it. If you know of a local agency that works, it's probably better to work with a local agency than it is to work with a bigger agency.
Yeah.
To answer that first question, though, you definitely should not work with that recruiter that's not responding. That's his job.
Yeah. I want to basically pinpoint two things there. The first is setting that timeline up. So it's not, hey, Christian, I'm Adriel. This is my resume. Can you get me a job tomorrow? Right? The answer is no. And you're going to be frustrated. And Christian's going to be frustrated. And it's not going to go well. But coming through a boot camp, whatever stage you're at, make today the day. You reach out to Christian and a couple other people. That's the first thing. The second thing, and Christian, I'm going to say this and I'm going to do my best. This is not an offensive thing, but it's a blatant thing. Recruiters are in it to make money, just like anybody else. So again, admit it and say, all right, Christian pays for his apartment and supports his family if he places you. So make it as easy as possible for Christian to want to place you, right? Keep him engaged, keep him updated. Say, hey, Christian, like, saw this role on your job. Do you think it's a fit? Message him every once in a while, right? He wants to place you. And partially he got into recruiting to love to help people, but he certainly stayed in it because he's good at it, right? Sure. And so recognize the fact that people are there, that recruiters are there to help you, that they earn their living helping you, but you've got to make it easy because again, there's 30 of you right here and about 30 million more elsewhere who are all leveraging people in different ways. The more specific you can be, the more you can target, like Christian said, just one person and say, hey, Christian's my guy, not just four corners because there's 30 people there all competing. Christian is my guy. Target that one particular person. It's super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Helping with that, working with just one recruiter definitely helps. I think they had some more questions in the chat. I'm maybe not reading it.
There are a bunch more questions. Timeline wise, I want to be sensitive because I don't like going over the 30-minute mark. So here's what I'd love to do. Christian, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Would you mind dropping into the chat your LinkedIn as well as the Four Corners website so folks can check it out? If they find something specific that they like on Four Corners, or if they want to connect with you and learn a little bit more, is there something that you think, what is the best way? Sorry, what is the best way to connect with you?
Sure, absolutely. Reaching out to me would probably be the best way to go about it. I'll drop my phone number and my email addresses on there as well, so you guys can have my contact information. I think if you're getting ready to graduate and you need to start looking, the best time is always now. Do not wait till last minute to start looking for things because it just never works out that way. I think the best way to go about it is to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success. So I'll leave you all with that. I'll leave you all my contact information as well as the company website so you can take a look at that. And thank you again for having me.
Awesome. Christian, thank you so much. If you've got 5 minutes, there are a couple questions in the chat, and if you could respond to them in the chat, that would be awesome. Would really appreciate that. Besides that, guys, connect with Christian, right? Do that networking. You have all your coaches at all your boot camps. They're not saying anything. We're not saying we're not a bunch of geniuses here. It's just network. Let other people help you out and make sure to be reliable for them. So Christian's gonna take a couple of minutes and respond to those questions. Thank you so much for joining us. And I encourage you all to connect with him. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the interview question. What do you think will be one of the most difficult parts of this job for you? Scott, do you see my screen? Give me a thumbs up, Scott. Perfect. So first, I want to give a few tips as I was watching yesterday's interview questions. Again, if you have questions throughout, please drop them in the chat and I'll try to address them as well. So some tips from watching yesterday's answers. First is it's really important to be specific. Right? I saw a lot of people give some answers that are very general and broad and almost like you're trying to be wise. And I see that happen all the time in almost every field. If you're talking to people who are salespeople, and it's like, what makes a good partnership? They'll say, well, it's all about trust and transparency and leading the buyer down to whatever, being very philosophical and management textbook. And same thing for engineers. I saw some people's answers that are very broad. And why did you want to become an engineer? Well, for the law, then it really changes the world and all that stuff. And while that's true, it's not memorable enough. Everybody wanted to become an engineer to change a world and to really make things happen and whatever. Try to be specific. Here's the thing that inspired me. Here's the moments. Here's the tool. It was Sally who taught me something, or Joey's technology company that inspired me, or whatever. Try to be specific where you can. Don't try to be overarching because it's not going to be as memorable as you think. The second thing, and this one's really tough, right? Christian said, talk about stories, try to be memorable in that capacity. But when you're telling a story, you've got to recognize that people don't know you as well as you know you. Now, what that means is when you're telling a story that's complicated and it's got multiple parts, you know all of the backstory. You know absolutely everything that happened. And so you can skip over a few details that in your mind don't seem consequential. But if someone's listening to this for the first time and they're watching and they're like, wait, I don't really get how you came from here to there, right? I missed something really crucial. They're not going to be able to put that together in their mind. So when you're answering these, this is why we practice. This is why you experiment with these stories and tell them over and over again until you've really got them down. Practice your story and then rewatch it or show it to somebody or get feedback from us or drop it in your Slack group at your boot camp and see if they understand the story that you're telling, because it's a really, really important thing to make sure they actually can connect the dots there. So just 2 tips from watching yesterday's answers, but great job, guys. Keep practicing. I love seeing it. Would love to see some more people. I know there's people who've been attending, but have not yet built up the confidence to practice. I know it's scary, but remember, make it public for an hour, get some feedback, and then make it private, and you can improve. Post that first answer, and you'll really find a lot of confidence. So let's talk about our interview question of the day, which is, what do you think will be one of the most difficult parts of this role for you? So there's a few reasons that somebody might ask you this question. The first is they want to know if you're missing anything super core to the role, right? Are you applying for a front-end engineering job and you're saying, well, it's going to be really tough because I don't really know CSS at all. Yeah, it feels like it's not going to work out, right? So are you missing anything super core? Are you a fit for the role, right? That's a little bit different than are you missing anything super core? Are you a fit means, are you fit for the culture? Are you fit for the team? Are you a fit for the expectations? More than just, like Christian said, all right, let's assume you got your JavaScript, HTML, and CSS down. Are you a fit for being able to work cross-functionally? If it's a client-facing role, are you very nervous talking to clients? Some of those other parts of the job, because it's more than just sitting there and writing code all day long. And the last thing is, how difficult is it going to be to ramp you up? Onboarding, as anyone who's ever onboarded anyone knows, is a very expensive and time-consuming process. And the less time it takes to get somebody comfortable in a role, the better it is for the hiring manager, for the team, for the company, for the HR department. So they want to know how difficult it will be to ramp you up. So try to address those things. Are you missing anything super core to the role? Are you a fit? And how difficult will it be to ramp you up? So here's a bit of advice. The first is, again, you want to be specific, like we talked about earlier, but not crippling. You got this nice little graphic of, help me, I can't swim. Well, why the hell are you in the sea, right? If you don't have the core role, the core ability, maybe this is not the job application for you. If you're a front-end engineer and you're applying for full stack jobs, but you don't have any back-end capabilities, maybe this isn't the job for you, right? So you want to make sure you share something specific that you're working on, but not crippling. So a few tips: don't be fake in general and say, well, one of the difficulties will really be making sure that I'm able to ramp up and work as hard as I want to work. It's pretty easy to see through that. Be specific. Now, where do you get that specificity? Ideally, it's something that you can tie to the job description. I was looking at the job description. I saw that on there, there's a business intelligence component. And I haven't really worked much with Microsoft BI, but I've actually taken a class on it and I'm improving, right? It's not a huge part of the job. You're not there to be a business intelligence data analyst, but it's a component and something you can work on. So make it specific to the job and not crippling. When you're practicing this, right, when the real interview, you should take it from a specific job description and then apply to that. When you're practicing, just pick something that might exist at a future company, right? What might be hard? Is it working on a huge team or having long timelines or being client facing? Pick something specific and try to practice around that. That'll make your answers feel a lot more realistic. Next is, you want to tell the story of how you learned before, how you've overcome challenges before. If you recognize this character in this show, drop it in the chat. It was one of my favorites of 2020. And I just want to make sure I'm working with people who have good taste in television here, So drop it in the chat if you recognize who this woman is playing chess. So what I want you to do is be able to share. There you go. Alessa wins the prize of me shaking my hands and saying her name. So that's right. It's Queen's Gambit. I'll share the metaphor in a moment. So thank you, Christian. Thank you very much for answering those questions. And hopefully folks reach out to you soon. So when you're talking about weaknesses or difficulties or anything like that, share the story of how you've accomplished things like that before, right? Share the story of last time you started at a company and what one of those difficulties looked like and how you accomplished that. What were the important things you did to learn quickly on that job? Share that, hey, you just joined a boot camp 4 months ago and you didn't know a line of code. And then all of a sudden you've been pushing 100 lines a day or whatever, right? What are other times that you've ramped up and show you're able to do that really, really well? Right. And Queen's Gambit, you've got this young woman who happens to be a drug addict and an incredible chess player at the same time. There's this great storyline, spoiler alert, coming up, where she gets super drunk and loses a game. And then she shows up the next time to play the same guy sober. She studied his openings and she wins. Yay, happy ending, right? What you want to do is say, hey, here's what I've done before. Here's things I did well or things I could have improved on. But now coming into this, I've got a plan. I'm going to do an incredible job. And that's where that last part comes in. Show that you have a plan. And tell me if you know who this fella in the football helmet is. So show that you have a plan, right? If you know that there are going to be challenges as you move into this role, based on, show that what you're going to do, show what you're able to do. Are you going to talk to a lot of people, ask a lot of questions, set up a lot of coffee meetings, take an additional course in that specific role? Are you going to shadow people? Show that you have a plan. I guess maybe engineers aren't watching a lot of old 90s football movies, but this is Rudy. Oh, there you go. Cassandra, that's what I'm talking about. This is Rudy. And so Rudy is a lightweight who dreams of playing for the Fighting Irish. He dreams of playing for Notre Dame football, but he's small. He's like 5'6". He's pretty weak. He's not very fast. He is not built for this game, but he has a plan. Right? He's going to outwork everyone. He's showing up to the gym early. He's learning plays and becoming a great route runner. He's figuring out a plan that he's going to approach this week. So again, I'm going to repeat it over and over this week, but recognize your faults. Because if you can recognize your faults as a candidate, then you begin to be able to show why they're not that big of a deal. So recognize your faults and what you're not able to do as well yet, and show that you have a plan to improve. And as always, the more specific you can be, the better. And you'll be able to watch my answer in a moment because I practiced this right before this, but I tried to come up with a specific plan of how I would address one of my weaknesses that's tied to a job description based on what I've done before, right? So remember, when you're answering this question, pick something specific, not crippling though, not core to the job, and ideally if you can, tied to the job description. Tell me about what you've learned about onboarding before and how you've handled challenges before. And then show me what your plan to improve is. That, hey, no matter what the challenge is, you are going to do great in this role. So here's what happens next. If you don't, and we'll share some time for questions in a moment, but if you don't have a Riveter account yet, go to riveterworks.com, sign up an account. It's free. It always will be. Find the question, and I'll show you in a moment where to find it, and practice your answer, and try to give feedback to at least one other video. This is so, so important, as we talked about at the beginning. It makes other people better, and it makes you better, and it really strengthens this whole community here. So this is the Riveter homepage. It looks pretty much the same for everyone. To find this question, you want to be on the questions tab. You want to click by industry. You want to click on boot camps. And then you'll see this third answer over here where it says practice your other answer. If you want to see other people's answers first, you can see other people's answers. Here's my answer. And then you can go in and actually practice your own answer. A couple key points if you haven't done this before. So again, this is how you find it. And I will share this deck with you all right now so you guys can open it up. There you go. So I'm going to drop this in the chat so that you have it. A couple key points. The first is there's a very small white button that allows you to record. We're working on making the button bigger. If any of you start coding with video soon and have some tips about how to make it easier, that'd be great. It's harder than you think. So point is, little white button to record. Make sure to click add target roles. I know a bunch of you haven't done this yet. Add target roles just opens up this window. So you can say you're a engineer with X number of years experience, and that helps people give you better feedback. Because if I know you have 0 years experience or 20 years experience, I'm going to give you different feedback. So make sure to click that add target roles button and add your target roles and experience. And then lastly, all your answers on Riveter are default private. Nobody can see them except for you. However, for the course of this project here, would encourage you to tap that button and make it public so that we can see your answer and we can give you guys feedback and help you improve. Once you've gotten your feedback, feel free to make it private again. And nobody can see it. And then you just got it there when you're preparing for your next interview and you're like, I wonder how I answered questions in the past. You'll be able to check that out for yourself.